Well, look, in the wake of this nonsense last week in relation to the Pacific Island Forum and the nations of the Pacific obviously wanting money from Australia, Australia offered $500 million. Australia invests, as Peter just said, $1.4 billion in the region, your money. But as Sydney's Daily Telegraph wrote on Saturday, the cry bullies want more money and they demand Australia end coal mining and not open any new mines. The reality is we won't have any money for the Pacific Islands if we shut down our largest export revenue earner. And the implied threat is, well, if you don't give it, we'll get it from China, the world's greatest polluter. But you'll notice these Pacific Island leaders don't call out China. Yet China has a seat at the Pacific Island Forum. As Professor Judith Sloan wrote on Friday, to be lectured by some jumped-up leaders from the Pacific Islands that we should close down our coal industry is both to underscore their ignorance and demonstrate their extreme naivety. With coal our largest export earner, the closure of this industry would seriously undermine our capacity to provide any funds to our neighbours in the Pacific. Then there's the New Zealand issue and New Zealand siding with the Pacific Islands. But the dairy industry in New Zealand is responsible for 50% of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions. Are they going to close down the dairy industry? Remember this, Australia's Liddell coal-fired power station emits about 8.8 million tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent, 8.8 million tonnes. New Zealand's agriculture sector emits about 40 million tonnes, which brings us back to Liddell. We're in all sorts of trouble when it comes to electricity and energy in this country. Power prices are now 221% higher than they were in 1997. The CPI in that time has risen 70%. This is because the government has backed renewable energy at the expense of coal-fired power for the last 20 years. $5 billion of taxpayers' money in subsidies to renewable energy every year. Which brings us to power futures. This is when poor business have to buy the power that they'll need next year. Well, power futures in Victoria have jumped to $148 a megawatt hour for the first 3 months of next year. They were $99 a megawatt hour in January this year. January next year, $148. In 2011, the wholesale electricity price in Victoria was $29. 2015, $37. This year, as this renewable energy rubbish starts to kick in, $99. And now the wholesale price for Victoria for the first 3 months of next year, $148. Who are the bureaucrats who advised government and said that cheap, subsidised renewables were going to lower wholesale prices? Every single one of them should be sacked. In New South Wales, the average wholesale price for electricity in 2015 was $35. It's now $105 a megawatt hour. And we don't have a new coal-fired power station anywhere. And the Pacific Islands last week, lecturing Australia, they want us to ban coal. But they're not prepared to tell China to ban coal. China are planning the construction of another 290 gigawatts of capacity of coal-fired power stations in the coming year. 290 gigawatts. The Liddell coal-fired power station capacity, 1.6 gigawatts. Consider this. China's our biggest trading partner. We all know that. We've got 22 operating coal-fired power plants, 22. China has more than 1,000 coal-fired power generating plants and a further 130 under construction. They would emit over 4 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. Put another way, the 130 coal-fired power plants to come online in China will produce more carbon dioxide than the total produced by all Australia. India have 292 operating coal-fired power plants. We've got 22. India have a further 41 under construction. Between 2016 and last year, coal-fired generation in the Asia-Pacific region increased by 330 terawatt hours. That's the equivalent of 33 Hazelwoods. But since Hazelwood was shut down by the Victorian Labor government, in a move supported by Prime Minister Turnbull, electricity prices have doubled in Victoria and New South Wales and increased by more than 70% in South Australia, Tasmania and Queensland. And yet we're a country rich in energy, as we've just been saying. And all this ridiculous escalation in price is being paid for by you, families, pensioners, supermarkets, businesses small and large. And at this rate, we're going to lose business, lose jobs and lose money. What is the definition of crisis? Yet we're still wedded to this Paris stuff, and we're still wedded to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change official Ottmar Edenhofer published a paper in 2010 in the German magazine NZZ. He said in 2010, it's a big mistake to discuss climate policy separately from the major themes of globalisation. The climate summit in Cancun is not a climate conference, but one of the largest economic conferences since the Second World War. He said, one has to free oneself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy. This has almost nothing to do with environmental policy anymore. One thing's become increasingly clear. In the near future, climate policy will redistribute the world's wealth. How have we been sucked in by this rubbish? I repeat, we've got 22 operating coal-fired generating plants producing 120 million tonnes of carbon dioxide annually. No plans to construct any more. China, our biggest trading partner, has more than 1,000 coal-fired power plants, a further 130 under construction. We emit 128 million tonnes of carbon dioxide annually. China's plants emit 4,271 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. India's got 292 coal-fired power plants, another 41 under construction, emitting more than 1,000 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. We emit 128 million tonnes. Well, enter Trevor St Baker. He has proposed 2 new heli plants, high efficiency, low emissions. Remember, earlier this year, the federal government released a short list of 12 submissions suggesting ways to increase national baseload power. And the short list included only one coal-fired power project, and that was an upgrade of a power station at Lake Macquarie. What do we say over and over again? Almost all the problems we face as a nation have been created by government. A clean coal heli plant would produce reliable baseload electricity for between $40 and $78 per megawatt hour and emit up to 90% less carbon dioxide, if that's what you're worried about. Trevor St Baker is a director of the St Baker Energy Trust, the chairman of Sunset Power International and the founder and deputy chairman of ERM Power. He is a potential buyer of AGL's Liddell coal-fired power plant. He said he'll reboot it, keep it operating well beyond its recently revised 2023 closure date, and he said, we'll be a bidder for buying Liddell. We have a track record for being able to deliver the generation that the system needs. Well, he's in our Brisbane studios. Trevor, good evening and thank you for your time. Well, anyone in government listening to you? Who's talking to you? Who are you talking to?
Well, we're hardly getting the advice from politicians, and we don't really elect politicians to know anything about the electricity sector. We have agencies looking after that, and the agencies are doing us a very poor job in overseeing a mismanagement of the energy market, the closure of power stations, the shortage of 24/7 baseload power, high costs and unreliability, and simply we've been spending, as you said, $4 to $5 billion a year for the last few years to subsidise the uptake of renewables, Alan, and what isn't understood in the community, and the agencies aren't advising the Australians that we have twice the amount of sun and wind than the rest of the world.
Trevor, just to interrupt you there.
Yes.
See, this is what happens. These pictures are shown, all that stuff coming out of those towers there is carbon. That's not carbon dioxide. And people think, oh, this is a terrible polluting thing. Carbon dioxide's invisible. That is carbon. We're not talking about that. Trevor, how can business face prices next year that you've got to buy down the track at $148 a megawatt hour? Now, I had a leading businessman say to me last week, we're finished, we're out of it, we're off to America.
Well, the jobs and the businesses and jobs in Australia are looking to go offshore and take the jobs overseas. And will they create less emissions? They won't create less emissions. They'll use the same coal from Brazil or South Africa in different countries, and the jobs will be there. The Tomago smelter is making it very clear to government and the owners of the Tomago power station and the Portland power station and the Boyne Island power station, and they're just the tips of the iceberg, are saying we can't continue to operate in Australia at these prices. Where is our forward planning of power stations? And yet the agencies are printing pictures of us closing down our power stations, and we have all these armchair commentators saying, oh, well, when they close, we can do this or we can do that. And no one's putting a price on all that. We have already subsidised more sun and wind than the rest of the world will achieve in 20 years' time, and we should just consolidate there, pick up where we're at with the existing stations we've got, keep them going, operate the transmission system as it is at the moment, but we still have a shortage of baseload power, and that's why Victoria needs a replacement of at least half of the Hazelwood power station, and we need to be planning now for an eventual retirement of Liddell, but not before. But it has to be timed so that it's in service on a like-for-like basis with the baseload power that is closed eventually down at Liddell.
All right, Trevor St John, it's Peter Credlin here.
Hi, Peter.
Hello. Just explain to us, AGL have said there's no life beyond the close down of the Liddell power station. AGL currently own it, but of course, if you look at where they want to sort of sweat their assets, it's in AGL's bottom line interests to shut down Liddell and people move to more expensive energy sources that they will then offer consumers.
Exactly.
How confident are you, take us through a little bit of the detail, that you can keep it running a lot longer than the AGL mob are prepared to?
Well, I'm not saying we can keep it going that much longer because we don't know how they've let that plant fall apart. All we know is that our plant at Vales Point, at 40 years old, is breaking operating records for continuous operation at 40 years old, and it's maintained as reliable, heading towards its 50th year, and we have potential plan to extend its life for another 20 years at the cheapest cost of electricity that you could have, and the same ought to have been able to be done at Liddell. But Liddell is a baseload power generating precinct. It was developed by the state government. It has a development approval, and it's operated as a baseload power supply service to the people of New South Wales, and it was sold at a time when the private sector could have managed those power stations and has managed the power stations better over a period of time since the electricity market started in the various states. But it should be preserved. The Liddell area should be preserved as a baseload power generating precinct, not for any other use, and the market should be made to pay it for its spinning reserve and the services it needs as renewables have been intruded, and the power station has to ramp down and ramp back up again.
Well, just before we go, I just want to ask you this. Everything you say to people watching you tonight makes sense, but you've got outfits like BHP and Rio buying all this global warming crap, and they're arguing that, you know, we've got to demonise coal-fired power, we've got to, what do they say, transition to renewables. I mean, what chance have we got with BHP, Mackenzie and these people in other parts of the world making all these high-minded speeches, and here we are facing the prospect of having to turn the lights out?
Look, it's the easiest political shot to campaign for something like a 2050 net zero emissions. That's 10 elections away, and we can't. We want to know. I want to know why the Australian Energy Market Commission and the market operator aren't saying to people the real cost of doing the plan that they have to build more renewables, subsidise the renewables, $5 billion a year. Subsidise the transmission to get it to the cities, and then there's too much there, so they have to subsidise the pumping of it up in the air so that it can be done other times. There is no way that's cheaper, and if the people of Australia told politicians and bureaucrats anything at the last election, they said, look, until you shut down what we've got and try to replace what we've got, make sure you're telling us it'll be cheaper electricity.
Absolutely.
Because we know it's not, and they won't tell us.
Absolutely.
That's the big issue.
It is. Good on you. Good to talk to you, and you keep talking. We'll keep talking. Thank you for your time. That's Trevor St Baker. I mean, he's forgotten more than they know. See, Peter, we've got all these international statutory authorities. Just before we go to the break, the International Energy Agency. I mean, does anyone listen to these people? I mean, this is their job. This is their full-time job. They're supposed to be the experts and all the rest of it. They advise the world. And they have said that wind and solar, at the very best, quote, will only make up 21% of global electricity generated by 2040. 21% at best. Where's the other 80 come from?
And it's currently about 2%, so that's a big ramp up between 2% that's today.
Well, that's global, see?
Yeah, they're global numbers.
Global, because France are into all of this sort of stuff. They got hydro and all that sort of stuff, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But, I mean, nonetheless, where's the other 80% going to come from? And don't they listen to these people?
Yeah, but I also implore Australians who care about the budget bottom line that we want strong hospitals and roads and schools. We want drugs on the PBS. We've actually got to have an economy to pay for all of those things. And I've sat there in the room when the knife, the pen is coming out and going through columns, trying to save money, trying to repay debt, trying to deal with the interest payment we pay as a country, which, just like your mortgage, is dead money. If we don't keep viable jobs in this country and an economy, we might as well pack up and go home. We will be the mendicant state of the South Pacific. We will sell our souls to China. We've got to keep energy in this country. And I said, we've been blessed with all the energy resources we have in this country. Let's just get out of our own way.
You just can't, they just can't seem to make a statement. They can't seem to say, we will build 2 coal-fired power stations. No one seems to be able to say it. What's the problem? We've still got Paris, governmental panel on climate change. Every editorial, I get attacked because I do something about arguing these people talking rubbish in the Pacific Islands over climate change. It is rubbish, but at the end of the day, if they want to go down that route, then I'm sorry, we then become the poor, what did Paul Keating say? The poor white trash of Asia. That's where we're heading when we're energy rich.